Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Ex-Bioware producer Mark Darrah has opened up a fascinating discussion regarding whether or not Baldur's Gate 3 is going to have a significant cultural impact on the video game industry. He believes the impact will be muted and that a lot of companies will not attempt to replicate the success that Larian has had. To some degree, I agree with him, but for different reasons than what he chose to emphasize in his video. And so I thought it was worth making my own video going over some of his thoughts while also giving you my own. Let me make it clear right up front, this video is not about hating Baldur's Gate 3. Mark Darrah does not at all try to diminish how amazing a game that was or how successful it was or anything of that sort. This is a discussion about, is it going to cause other companies to try to do the same thing? Let me also note that this is a video you can kind of listen to more. I'm probably just going to throw some footage up here while I give you both his thoughts and then later on in the discussion, my thoughts as well. The footage is probably going to be from my Baldur's Gate 3 live stream that's going on right now. I'm allowing anybody from the channel who wants to jump into the honor mode playthrough and play, they're more than welcome to do so. In fact, I'm going to be installing a mod today that'll allow up to 16 people to be in my game at one time. So if that interests you, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that bell so you get notified when I go live. And if you like, go ahead and hit that like button for this video. Let me know that you appreciate the content. All right, now before we get into Mark Darrah's comments, let's start with where I think this all began, which is actually David Gator's comments that I made a video about either yesterday or a couple of days ago. Basically, he laid out in a Blue Sky thread the reasons why he left BioWare, and then David Gator also mentioned that he felt like EA never knew what to do with Dragon Age, and that they had a lot more respect for Mass Effect in comparison to Dragon Age, and that even though Dragon Age sold better as a series, Mass Effect was the one EA felt like had more action, was easier to market, and was more impactful from a cultural standpoint. And so overall, the big wigs at both BioWare and EA liked it more. Mark Darrah then made a video basically saying there's a big difference between sales and impact, meaning cultural impact. And he brought up an interesting example of this outside of the video games industry in the form of Avatar, basically saying that, hey, Avatar, one of, if not the highest selling movies of all time, and yet how many movies do you see trying to replicate what Avatar has done? Not very many, right? Most of them will just continue on trying to do their thing, even though they recognize how amazing a success Avatar was. So it had massive sales, but not much cultural impact. Whereas a movie like Iron Man didn't have nearly the amount of sales that Avatar had. However, its cultural impact was significantly more because studios could look at Iron Man and basically say, hey, there's a lot here that we might be able to replicate in our own movies that we would actually want to do. And therefore, you saw a lot of movies try to basically spin that wheel again and recreate all the things that made Iron Man so great. And so he says basically the same way in the video game industry. Well, you'll have these giant games like GTA and Zelda that have massive amounts of sales, unquestionably large commercial success. But then when you look at the cultural impact that they have on the industry, how many games are actually trying to replicate what GTA does? How many games are actually trying to replicate what Zelda does? Not very many, because many studios feel like that's just way, way out there beyond what we would even attempt to do. So I can look at your success and appreciate it, but it doesn't mean that I would try to do it for myself at my studio or with my game. And he compares that to KOTOR and Mass Effect, both of which are games that had sales figures that were way, way less than GTA or Zelda, and yet you had a lot more people trying to copy them. You had a lot more people looking at them and saying, hey, this is the standard for what other games should be, in a way that other studios said, we can do this, we can replicate this. And this not only does something very, very well, it does it well in a way where we feel comfortable trying to put it into our own games. And so you can make the case that those games were much more culturally impactful than some of the much larger games that have much larger sales. So then if we circle back around to BG3, what are some of the reasons why he feels that the success cannot be repeated? So first and foremost, he mentions the insane popularity of Dungeons and Dragons, right? It is the most popular tabletop game on the planet, played worldwide, etc., etc. I'll be honest with you, I disagree with him on this note because at the time Baldur's Gate 3 came out, the Dungeons and Dragons brand had been significantly damaged. Nobody, very, very few people had good things to say about Wizards of the Coast. And honestly, there were a ton of people who were concerned that BG3 sales were going to be negatively impacted because of its association to Dungeons and Dragons. So while I absolutely don't want to try to make it seem like it didn't help, being associated with the Dungeons and Dragons brand definitely helped get this game name recognition and definitely caused it to pop up on people's radars in a way that it might otherwise not have. But to say that Larian owes a large amount of their success to D&D's popularity, nah, I definitely don't agree with that. He also makes a comment regarding simplified cinematics. And I get what Mark Darrah was trying to say. Like, when you look at a lot of the cinematics in BG3, they ironically follow a lot of that BioWare style, right? Where it's very closed in, you're just watching these two people. There's not a whole lot of pan out shots or situations where you're seeing a bunch of things that don't directly involve the two people in the conversation. So I understand what he means by simplified cinematics and putting the money elsewhere to provide more choices and things of that nature. But the problem I guess I have with that reasoning is the cinematics are so good. The cinematics are so freaking good. There's nothing about them that looks cheap at all. The animations are amazing. In my live stream yesterday, there were multiple occasions where I was laughing out loud because of some crazy animation a character was doing in reaction to what had just been said. It's just super, super well done. So I personally wouldn't refer to their cinematics as simplified, and I don't think it can be looked at as something where a AAA company wouldn't feel comfortable replicating this because they feel like, you know, their customers would look down on the product, would say, why aren't you giving us more layered cinematics? Copying the style and format of BG3 cinematics and making them just as engaging and making those characters feel just as alive is a great way to make your game more marketable. He does mention a couple of other reasons that I agree with more, though. He mentions the studio structure of Larian made it much easier for them to create BG3 in a way that can't be done by other studios. We're going to talk about that more in a bit. And he also mentioned BG3 having an unvoiced protagonist, that essentially a lot of RPG developers right now are focusing on using a voice protagonist because they believe that is what the fan base wants, and that Larian was able to quote unquote get away with not having your main character voiced, whereas another studio might get reamed over coals for doing the same thing. We're going to bring that up later as well. I think that's a great point, interesting to talk about. So just overall, with those points put together, he's basically saying he feels like when studios look at this situation and look at the unique circumstances that allow BG3 to come about, most of them say, I can't replicate this. I wouldn't want to. It doesn't make sense. It's not something I feel like I could be successful at. And because of that, BG3 is not going to have a major cultural impact because most studios are not going to try to live up to what BG3 has essentially become. So those are his reasons for it. Now let me give you mine. I have three main reasons that I feel like BG3 is not going to have a significant cultural impact. And to be clear, I do agree with Mark Darrah. I think his overall reasoning is correct. It's just that on a granular level, my specific reasons for why it's correct are a little bit different from his, right? So first and foremost, let's talk a little bit more about studio structure, right? And I'm just gonna come out with it. Larian is a cut above the rest. Larian is flat out a better studio when it comes to making games than just about anybody else in the market right now. And most of the development studios that are making games at this time, I just don't see how they would be able to compete or compare to what Larian has created. So right off the top of my head, this is by no means all the studios, but when I look at it, BioWare and Bethesda are more and more looking like relics of the past. Very few people believe they're ever going to be able to create truly great games that we compare to what's being made right now. Of course, I have high hopes for the next Mass Effect. I have high hopes for the next Elder Scrolls 6, but to be honest, I have extremely low expectations. Ubisoft sticks to their formula. They make the same type of games over and over again. People keep buying them, even though people keep saying they're not impressed. So there's really no reason for Ubisoft to change. I don't see any reason why they would, and therefore they're not going to be making anything like BG3 either. Spiders, inXile Entertainment, and Obsidian all focus on AA titles. So even though I love all of their games and I really enjoy playing them, I don't see them coming out with AAA extravaganzas anytime soon. So when I look at the landscape, there's only two developers who I feel like could reasonably knock Larian Studios off their perch. The first one is Owlcat. Owlcat, of course, is known for AA games, but recently they announced that their next game is going to be an Unreal Engine 5. It's going to be fully voice acted and fully cinematic. Now, I'm not sure if it's actually AAA. It's probably not, but it's obvious that's the direction they're going in, right? And as far as writing chops, RPG chops, I feel like Owlcat definitely can stand toe-to-toe with Larian in a lot of ways. I do currently feel like Larian is the better studio, but Owlcat could get there. And it's very exciting to see that they've decided to go ahead and stretch and try to become more and do more. I enjoy Owlcat games more than I enjoy Larian games. In fact, I did a video comparing Baldur's Gate 3 and Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, and I did feel like Wrath of the Righteous is the better game, but I also feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is the game that kind of stretched more, reached more, and did things that we've really honestly haven't seen in the industry before on a higher level than what Owlcat has done. So it's going to be very interesting to see them attempt to produce a more highly cinematic experience and compare that to the work that Larian has been doing thus far. And then the other developer that obviously a lot of people would mention is CDPR. CDPR obviously focuses on highly cinematic experiences, incredible RPG developer, has made some of my favorite games of all time. I do consider Larian Studios to be superior to CDPR. I've heard incredible things about the state Cyberpunk is in right now. I haven't played it since launch, so I absolutely plan to circle back around and play it now in a much more completed state to get a better sense of where CDPR is now as a developer. But the thing is, Cyberpunk had such a terrible launch and a lot of people focus on that. And I think that kind of overshadows that CDPR has just about always had really awful launches that were disrespectful to the fans. And I say this as a fan of CDPR. The Witcher 1 was released in a virtually unplayable, terrible state, to the point that they had to comb through it again and again to finally get it to the point that it was a working game for the fan base. And to be clear, they got it there, and Witcher 1 is an amazing game now, and I definitely plan to play it on the channel, but it was released terribly, had an awful launch. Witcher 2, I remember having a pretty decent launch, no big issues. Witcher 3, though, was right back to the same type of thing. It was unplayable for a lot of people. A lot of folks don't remember that. I'm old enough. I was there. I remember it was flat out unplayable for large portions of the fan base. And then you finally had Cyberpunk, which was just legendary levels of, wow, you really don't give a damn about the people who buy your games. And so to watch them repeatedly release games in this state, there's just no way I could put CDPR on the same level of Larian Studios. It doesn't matter as much to me that 6 or 7 months later, your game is finally in a great state, and it compares very well with other RPGs that released in a fully playable state on day one. I'm sorry, to me that means something. I know we live in an age now where folks are real comfortable with buggy, broken games being released, but I'm definitely of the mindset of, hey, when you drop that 1.0 release, how stable it is actually does matter. And so, frankly, I don't put CDPR up as someone who's really going to be able to release a game that on day one we look at and say, oh, wow, yeah, this is definitely something that compares to what Larian Studios has done. So all of that together, I would say like Larian, the way the studio is structured is just a cut above the rest, and it would be very difficult for any of those other studios to live up to what they've been able to create. Now let's move on to my second reason, and that circles back to the comment about unvoiced protagonists. In my opinion, voice protagonists are significantly better, and dev studios are right to focus on them. I have no doubt that's going to result in some hate in the comments, and that some of you are very strongly of the belief that your experience is better when the character is unvoiced. I could not disagree more. Shepard from the Mass Effect series and Geralt from the Witcher series matter more to me than any other characters I've ever played, period. And the Baldur's Gate 3 experience is made worse by not having a voice. Taking control of an origin character who you know has an incredible voice, like Will or Lozelle or Shadowheart, and being forced to play them as mute because that's the way the game's set up is terrible. It's just absolutely terrible. And Divinity Original Sin 2 is the same way. Taking Thane or the Red Prince and removing those incredible voices and that voice work in order to have a silent protagonist did not make my experience with those games better in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Allowing players to create their own characters and then select their voices and giving them 2 or 3 completely different voice options for both male and female to hopefully allow them to craft the exact experience that they want is absolutely the way to go. And so I agree with Mark Darrah when he says there are many studios who are not going to want to replicate what Larian has done because they're going to feel like, hey, I need to have a voice on my protagonist. I agree, you do. There's a lot of people who try to make the case that if you put a voice on the main character, it's going to cause the game to have significantly less meaningful dialogue. And they've been able to get away with that because there weren't studios who were trying to push that boundary and show that that wasn't really true. The main character in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is fully voice acted, and they have already applied to hopefully break the Guinness World Record that Baldur's Gate 3 currently holds. It is not a requirement that just because your main character is voice acted that you're going to have less dialogue. And by the way, Owlcat has said, as I mentioned before, that all of their games moving forward are going to have fully voiced main protagonists, and that they do not believe that that will in any way, shape, form, or fashion force them to have less dialogue. So I'm really looking forward to when that first Owlcat game comes out and it's fully voice acted and we compare the word count to what we got from Wrath of the Righteous. And a lot of these people who have been trying to strongly stand behind the silent protagonist have to eat these words. A voice protagonist is 110% the way to go. And then the final reason I'll bring up why I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is probably not going to have a major seismic impact on the culture and cause a lot of studios to change what they're doing is because most studios, possibly even no studios are capable of replicating the amazing romances that Baldur's Gate 3 has. Baldur's Gate 3 is just a really, really sexy game. There's just nothing else to say about it. In the last live stream, we had the initial meeting with Carlock. Carlock pushes all the right buttons for me. Like immediately when she's on screen and she starts talking, you're like, this is an attractive person. I can't wait to talk to her more. And that's a skill. That's a skill to be able to craft a character who immediately appeals to different players on multiple levels. And the thing about the way Larian does romance and flirtation and attraction and sexiness is that they are very, very good at making it appealing for both men and women. And that's the part that I feel like a lot of developers just can't get right. There are some developers who are very, very good at crafting experiences that are nice for women, where women feel seen, where they feel represented, where they feel happy, and where they feel like, all right, this is a space I want to be in. And then there are other developers who are great at crafting experiences that are clearly tailored towards men. It's very, very rare that a studio can do both, where both men and women can look at some footage and both parties get something out of it, and both parties say, I want to buy this game. This character is attracted to me. This character is someone that I want to romance. This character is very, very appealing to me. Larian understands how to do that on a very, very broad scale. It's not just your party members. It's not just the characters you interact with all the time. There are some characters you only talk with a couple of times in Baldur's Gate 3 that just have a lot of massive sex appeal that oozes through all their marketing. I know people hate when I talk about this, but it's just facts. It's just facts. Sex sells. It does. And Larian understands that, and they understand how to craft their games in a way where they can take advantage of that, and a lot of other devs don't. I made a video talking about Josh Sawyer. He spoke about this openly. Josh Sawyer from Obsidian, the director who created Pillars of Eternity series. He said directly, the way Larian Studios handles romance is something he doesn't like, and he has no interest in creating it. And there's a lot of people like that who don't like romance at all in their games. It's a much more old school RPG way of looking at things, and consequently the amount of talent who's available to step into this studio and really help them create this kind of content, it's just not a common skill set. It's not. It's straight up just not. And so when you look at a lot of the marketing that Larian Studios did for Baldur's Gate 3 to make it 100% clear to the fan base how sexy and enchanting this experience was going to be, most developers would not be able to do the same thing. But to be clear, this shouldn't need to be stated, but in case it does, that doesn't mean we're not going to continue to get amazing RPG experiences, right? I'm really, really looking forward to Outer Worlds 2 from Obsidian. From everything I've heard, they're doing amazing things there. We're going to do another video on that really soon. I'm looking forward to Clockwork Revolution from In Exile Entertainment. I'm sure it's going to be a great time. I really loved Wasteland 3. I'm looking forward to Witcher 4. I'm looking forward to the Oblivion remaster, and I'm almost certainly going to play Elder Scrolls 6. So this is not about, are we going to continue to get great RPGs that we enjoy and have a good time playing? This is about, hey, how many RPGs are we going to get that's going to try to reach that plateau, that bar that Baldur's Gate 3 has now set? My answer, and Mark Darrah's answer, is probably not that many. Probably not very many, and probably not any of the studios that you're actually thinking of right now. But at the end of the day, I would love to be surprised, and who knows what the future holds. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Definitely would love to hear your thoughts down below. Do you feel like it's going to have a major impact? Do you feel like there's going to be a lot of studios trying to reach that bar? Do you disagree regarding my reasoning or maybe Mark Darrah's reasoning as to why more studios are not going to try to replicate that success? Definitely looking forward to hearing your thoughts, and I'll see you on the next video. Take care.